Good afternoon and welcome back to day 4 of Real Estate Live UK's October 2021 programme. Our weeks of free to attend virtual events run 3 times a year in February, June and October. The programme is brought to you by White Label and our partners and sponsors, and we'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the organisations that have contributed to the exceptional lineup taking place this week. During the sessions this week, places across the UK have been showcasing investment opportunities, and industry-leading experts from the public and private sectors have been discussing new ideas and topical issues relating to property. You can view the full programme of sessions taking place on our website. That link is www.realestatelive.co.uk. Several of our panels and presentations have been linked to our key themes for the week: culture and community, sustainable places and wellness. Right now, we head to Belfast to look at their opportunity to capitalise on city centre living in partnership with Belfast Renewed Ambition. But just before we start, I'd like to remind you, the audience, to please feel free to ask questions using Zoom's Q&A function. And now I'm pleased to hand over to our chair for this session, David Elliott, Senior Client Director at Lanyon Group. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Callum, and hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a really warm welcome to this Real Estate Live session. As Callum said, we're coming to you live from Belfast, and we have a veritable feast for you in the form of a panel session focused on Belfast's opportunity to capitalise on city centre living. To do that, I'm very pleased to say that I'm joined by a panel made up of true experts and representatives from the public sector, from the social housing sector, from agency and from the developer and landlord side. We have with us today Cathy Reynolds, who is Director of City Regeneration and Development at Belfast City Council. We have Rory Brooke, who is Head of Economics at Savills. We have Siobhan Macaulay, who's Director of Regional Services at the Northern Ireland Housing Executive. And we have James Eyre, who's Commercial Director at Titanic Quarter. Now, with my esteemed panellists, we're going to be delving into the huge potential which Belfast has for city centre living. Before we do that, it's worth looking at the ambitions that Belfast has. The city is aiming to be home to an additional 66,000 residents and increase the number of homes within the citywide area by nearly 32,000 by 2035. 1/4 of those which will be within Belfast city centre. To do that, Belfast City Council is working in collaboration with private and public sector partners to accelerate city centre living and to bring forward significant city centre residential opportunities across housing tenures. It aims to reimagine the city centre via placemaking development and by improving connectivity between the centre and the surrounding communities. Now, those are bold ambitions and ones which obviously require a vision, one which this session is going to dive into a little bit deeper. We're going to be finding out how Belfast is using housing-led regeneration to drive city centre recovery, support inclusive, sustainable growth and transform the city centre into an inclusive place to live, work and to visit. Before we go over to our panel, we also want to hear from you, so please do get in touch as the session rolls out and let us know if you have any questions. Now, over to the panel. Cathy, I want to turn to you first, if you don't mind, and I want you to set the scene for us. In a post-pandemic recovery plan is high on Belfast City Council's agenda, and we've already touched on that slightly, and it'll focus on digital and innovation, jobs and reskilling. Can you tell us more about that, and in particular the city's regeneration strategies and its aspirations?
Okay, thank you. Thanks, David. So obviously, in terms of, you've touched on the recovery framework that the council have, and whilst it's focusing on a number of areas, digital innovation, skills, community and city regeneration, at the core is a real drive to increase city centre living and housing regeneration right across the city. But even I suppose before that recovery framework, it was really a really key objective of the council and working in partnership with others. The Belfast Agenda you talked about, which is the city's community plan, talks about how we're seeking to have really ambitious growth targets in terms of 66,000 new people, but then in terms of the spatial articulation of that through the local development plan, seeing that translate into approximately 32,000 new homes, of which we hope that there's about 8,000 of those within the core city centre. The Belfast City Centre Regeneration and Investment Strategy, which is the regeneration policy for the city centre. And whilst that was a 2015, when it was first came out, it's probably more relevant now than ever, because it talked about really in terms of how do we reimagine our city centre, about the importance of increasing the city centre population. And fallen out of that, then we have a future city centre programme that the council has brought forward, and a really core element of that is just about how to grow the city centre population, but also about connecting to all of the communities that surround that. So it's not just about kind of new communities, but it's about having a real proper integrated neighbourhood. And in more recent times, then the Innovation and Growth Commission, which chaired by Sir Michael Lyons, and a number of other kind of partners on that as well, and both from the World Economic Forum and also local partners, have recently produced a report, Reset for Growth. And as part of that, identified up front and central is about how housing is going to be a real strong game changer and one of the economic levers in terms of economic recovery, not just in terms of delivering against the demand that clearly exists for housing, but also in relation to how that can be as strong at house building at scale, how that can bring forward economic recovery across the city. So it's up front and central in terms of our plans and those of our partners. The council itself doesn't directly deliver on housing, and that's why it's really key that we're doing that in conjunction with others as well.
That's a really bold vision for the future, and obviously placing housing right at the centre. Give us an example of some of the game changers that are in there to help achieve that vision and to reach those aims. Yeah, I suppose in terms of maybe the core city centre as well, there's limited, and there has been limited residential development in recent times, although there's something like 5,000 units at various stages of planning. Within the city centre, the University of Ulster are moving their campus into the city centre. So, that immediately brings you 15,000 students. There's been a large number of purpose-built student housing accommodation blocks that we didn't have in the city a few years ago. So we see that as kind of one of the areas of demand, if you like, coming forward. But there's also some other big, I suppose, game changers, for want of a better word. There's the Belfast Regional City Deal, a £1 billion across the region in terms of tourism, regeneration, innovation, digital and skills. One of those being the Destination Hub, which is a £100 million tourism project right in the middle of the city centre, the core city centre. The Belfast Rapid Transit, which is the transit system for Belfast, extend also within the city centre. But also, we, the council, have been working with the Department for Infrastructure and the Department for Communities in bringing forward. I mean, you talked about a bolder vision. The document is called A Bolder Vision for Belfast, and that's about how we can start to use our streets and places in the city centre, and how it connects to the communities around and to the areas around in a different way to try to make that more livable and more connected. And that's actually out for consultation just at the moment. So we see that as been quite instrumental. There are a number of other big schemes, big projects, and I know James, for example, will talk about what their ambitious plans and their progress that they have within that part of the city. And there are a number of others that are coming forward as well, and have gone through the planning system, that have housing right at the centre of them in terms of mixed-use developments. So, you've set out what the council's vision is, but you can't achieve that alone. You need the help of both the public and the private sector. How do you bring them in? How do you bring them along on that vision? Well, I suppose in terms of of course, there's the community plan, which is a number of the partners. So that is very much about a joined up approach in terms of that initial community plan, and then the local development plan is key and central to that. But I suppose we have also been working, and we've continued to work with a number of other private sector developers as well. But we've also been bringing forward some of our own lands, and have identified a number of opportunities within the city centre and outside of the city centre, using strategic use of our own land assets. We've been working with some of the other public sector bodies, including the Housing Executive, the Department for Communities and the private sector, and currently in train are a number of proposals in relation to some of the use of public sector and private sector land. So in that joined up approach, and as part of the community planning process as well, we have kind of
co-joined or having a collaborative approach about how to bring forward public sector lands and looking as well at innovative ways of funding potentially some of that development coming forward. So that's all quite exciting, I suppose, in relation to that. But it's also working closely, not just through our planning system, but then working closely with others in the private sector to bring some of that forward.
And there seems to be a real appetite to help you achieve that vision, just from sort of anecdotal evidence that I would have come across. They seem to be a lot of companies out there, both in the private sector and the public sector, just that want to help and get there and achieve that vision and work with you. Yeah,
certainly. There's I can say, like, just over the last couple, even in that sort of COVID world, there's definitely been a lot of interest, and I suppose it's in the city centre. There's actually a lot of land, undeveloped land, which is probably kind of a testament of kind of the past. There's a lot of undeveloped land, and there's definitely a lot of interest. A few years back, I said we had no purpose-built student accommodation, managed accommodation, but there's a significant number of beds now. So I can see that trajectory kind of coming through in terms of the city centre living piece, and lots of interest, both for public, private, and from funders. But we really want to try and capitalise on that. But certainly there's really good opportunity.
And I suppose they, like you, can see the potential for Belfast to really embrace city centre living, because with those student accommodation, those people will go on to jobs working in the city centre, and they'll want to live there, having got used to it, I suppose.
Yeah, that's certainly, and that seems to be an experience from working elsewhere as well. And I suppose, another kind of key driver on it as well is, that innovation city, and the innovation proposals and the ongoing plans for an innovation district in Belfast as well, and kind of from that sector in relation to innovation, digital, a really strong demand for it as well. But, not forgetting, of course, that, there's already our existing communities. So it's about having that all in the mix as well, just in terms of bringing that forward.
Yeah, and that's interesting. It's really about bringing the people that are there along with it as well, with the journey, about bringing new people in as well, but really making it a community feel as we go forward.
Yeah, certainly. It's just that neighbourhood feel, that community feel. And that's why as well, it's important that it's not just about, that it's also about the public spaces and the connectivity in between, which is why at the minute that bolder vision and that piece about how we use our streets and places is really, really important as well.
Yeah, really, really interesting. I want to bring in Rory, if we can, virtually, who's joining us today. Rory, you have an overview of the market across the UK and Ireland, and you've been doing a bit of work here, I know, and I want to get I suppose a broader view of what the current state of the residential market is, because that's quite key to what we're talking about here. But what are you seeing across the rest of the UK and Ireland?
So the residential market is generally healthy across the rest of the UK and Ireland, and city centres in particular. I mean, obviously, the top prime in places like London are not so strong, but the sorts of markets that we're interested in for Belfast are doing well, and there's a lot of activity going on, and some of the other UK cities, for example, where the build-to-rent sector is really taking off in the city centres. So there's a lot of positive signs and activity across the UK.
And so you have a broad view, and you're able to give a good kind of comparison of where Belfast is and the potential that it has for city centre living. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, no, we've been working for Belfast City Council over the last few months, helping develop a strategy for housing in the city centre. And as part of that work, we've been benchmarking Belfast against a number of other UK cities. So in particular, we've Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow, Liverpool, Leicester, and Sheffield. And what's very clear from that work is that Belfast is at the start of that trajectory, and so these other UK cities have their city centre living has really taken off in a phenomenal way. Huge growth in the city centre populations compared to what was there before. Real opportunities to transform. They've very much transformed themselves. And Belfast has many of the characteristics of these other cities and the potential to follow a similar path. And so we've been reviewing the potential there. I mean, I think one thing to emphasise is what a great city Belfast is. It's so interesting, so much there in terms of an exciting urban environment to live in. And the target of growth that Cathy was mentioning earlier on, 8,000 homes over the planned period to 2035, is ambitious but perfectly achievable in the context of how it compares with the other UK cities. So they have achieved similar rates of growth over the last 15 years or so, which equates to around, for Belfast, taking it forward and to achieve its plans would be growth of around 6% per annum, around 500 to 600 units per annum on average. And we've been looking at some of the underlying characteristics and drivers of that, and the demographics of how of the future population in Belfast fits reasonably well. So it's generally a younger population. It's generally there's a certain concentration of non-family households. Obviously, family households need to play an important role, but non-family households have played a big role in the growth in other city centre populations. If you look at the characteristics of other cities, there's a big proportion of private rented, and that's through a combination. Quite a lot will be owner occupied, but then with buy-to-let scenarios. As Cathy's mentioned, there's the purpose-built students accommodation, and then there's the build-to-rent sector, which hasn't taken off in Belfast yet, but certainly has in a number of the other UK cities. And as Cathy was mentioning, there's a real good anchor in the student population, with Queen's and University of Ulster moving to Belfast, and still significant potential to grow that population. So, for example, if you compare Belfast, where 28% of the city centre population is currently students, compare that with Liverpool, where 50% of the city centre population is students. So you can see there's a lot of potential there. Also, I think it's worth pointing out the links to the economy there, where key issue is what's the graduate retention, and this is a key sort of metric for regional cities in the UK. And actually, Belfast it does quite well on that front. So it's got a 50% retention rate of graduates, which is amongst it's comparable to Liverpool and to Manchester and Birmingham. So it's actually in quite a good position there to capitalise on that looking forward. So overall, and there's, as Cathy also was mentioning, there's plenty of sites available for development. So there's lots of potential to bring that forward. And of course, there's challenges as well, but with the right actions and tools in place, there's no reason why that shouldn't all be unlocked.
And tell me, Rory, what can Belfast learn from the other cities that are already further along that journey? Are there any kind of points that we could take note of that would really help us achieve the aims that Cathy just set out there?
Yeah, so I think, and it's quite interesting because the team that's working on this project did some work about 5 years ago looking at the build-to-rent sector in the UK, and at that point it hadn't really taken off, and so we were looking into what it was that could unlock it, and that's now taken off in many of the a number of UK cities, and now the question is, well, how can it take off in Belfast? And I think there's obviously combined with the other things like student accommodation, but there's a number of things can help unlock.
Oh, have we lost Rory? I think
An island scene can get some reassurance that it's a commercially attractive proposition, and so that can take the form of public sector investment to help unlock the sites. There's also a number of actions that could help ease the process, both in planning and post-planning, of bringing sites forward.
We thought we lost you for a second there, Rory, but you came back very quickly, so it's great to have you. Just again, and you touched on it very briefly there. We can sit here. We know Belfast. We live in it. We work in it. And you mentioned there that you've been working in it quite recently. What's it like seeing it with fresh eyes, I suppose? And you said it's a great city to be in. What was your first opinions of it?
Yeah, as I say, it's a fantastic city. I absolutely loved visiting Belfast and spending a good amount of time with our clients at the City Council, having a look around the city. That there's great things going on there. Really interesting place, really exciting place, and so I think it does have a lot of the right ingredients to take off in that city centre living market.
Yeah, good. It's always nice to hear from somebody from outside here what they think of it. So thank you, Roy, for that. Siobhan, a huge part of what we're talking about here is it relies on the social housing sector as well. Can you give us a flavour of how your sector is working with some of the other stakeholders here to really drive forward that city centre living?
Absolutely, and we're delighted today that it's on the agenda and that effectively now housing-led regeneration is really opportune, and I think the timing is now appropriate for really driving this forward. As the strategic regional housing authority for Northern Ireland, we have the statutory responsibility to enable housing right across Northern Ireland. And obviously, in the emphasis on Belfast today, what we do is we partner closely with a range of partners in delivery of that. So with Kathy in the City Council, we provide in data in relation to what the housing investment requirements are, what the needs are, and do that wide-based assessment. We also link in on community planning as an enabler there and linked into the local development plans. Our own Chief Executive, Grania, puts it as a top priority and sits and chairs the housing subgroup of the Belfast Agenda, and we're very committed and look forward to assisting in delivery of the 8,000 houses. In addition to that, we partner with the housing associations, and in the last year, they with us have delivered over 2,400 starts on properties in a national pandemic. Mm-hmm. So they're critically important and demonstrating on delivery that's going on at the moment. And in addition to that as well, we have put internally place shapers in place in the last number of years who collaborate across the board. The other area is land, and Kathy mentioned on land. And with regard to land, what we do is we link with the Strategic Investment Board, we link in with City Council, we link in with our wider statutory partners to identify, get land so that we can develop it for housing. But the most critical part of this in housing-led regeneration is about the people. It's about the needs of specifically those that are on our waiting lists. It's about those who want houses and those who desire houses and what type of houses they require and need. So at central to this and the success of housing-led regeneration is pure engagement at all times with the population here across the board in Belfast, so that they are fully engaged and bought into what it is we will be developing for them for the future. And I'm very keen that we start including more and more, and we will do this moving forward, the younger people, and as Kathy says, students, younger people, and even school age, who actually have got a major part to play in decisions of what houses they will be living in longer term here in Belfast.
So you're in that engagement day in, day out. So yeah. What are you hearing at the minute? If what do they need at the minute? You talk about that need. What do we need from a social housing perspective in Belfast City Centre?
What we need effectively here is, and the way we assess need is, we have come up with a best practice model now linked with Belfast and Scotland. So we start off, what is the scale of that need? And for the first time ever, we've broken it into 3 areas. So we're looking at social housing, and we know that. And we have that for years on social housing. But we've moved further than that to actually look also at intermediate housing, which is people who have a level of affordability, but they actually can't pay the market rents, and then the market rent. So what we look at now is we're identifying right across the board, projected for the next 15 years, and what we see is in all areas housing need. And we are linking that in obviously to Belfast City Council. And that links in then to the planners. And the planners then can look at zoning and saying, right, where do we zone land, and particularly on where that need is in order to meet it. And we're absolutely delighted with the ambition that has been put in place in the last couple of years of putting 20% basically in for affordable and social. Mm-hmm. So it's going to change the landscape. because now we're actually going to, for the first time ever, we're going to have really good mixed tenure. And that is what people want. People want a choice. So we're going to have social housing, we're going to have intermediate housing, and then we're going to have private sector housing. So there's a choice there, and you really do develop a real community because you have people who are more inclusive, more involved. In addition to that, what we link with that as well is who's going to live in them. Well, we've carried out last year a latent demand test. And on that, we looked at our list and asked your preferences and would you go on a city waiting list, and did a shadow form of that. And we have had interest in that. So we know also from that waiting list that there is a demand for the housing. And then the third is then who would be there. Well, from doing that assessment, we can see, yes, there's younger people, and everybody says city centre younger people, but actually in the next 10 years, there's 20% increase in older people in that Belfast agenda, and older people they want public transport. They want not to be socially isolated. They want to be there in the city centre and have people around them, and they want a sense of community. So it's going to be older people, younger people, and families. There are small families and larger families. So it's actually a more diverse group than historically you would have assumed for city centres. And I think that's hugely exciting, because I think it's really going to create a real shared space in the city centre. And most importantly, a 24/7 economy. So linked into that economic driver, you will, instead of a Monday night where people go out to the suburbs and live elsewhere, you will have a thriving, living community within the city centre. So we totally welcome it. Timing is perfect now. I want to bring Cathy in because I know mixed use tenure is something that you're passionate about for the future of city centre living as well, and something that you believe is essential for that vision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I concur totally with what Siobhan was saying, even in terms of where that demand's coming from, because perhaps perception was that it is singles or young people, but certainly we've in terms of we've got fed back to us about that market demand is just right across the board, and mixed tenure is critical. So even in terms of the assets that we've been bringing forward in terms of strategic site assessments and development briefs, it is about mixed tenure, mixed use, mixed tenure, and I do think that's critically important to the success of that going forward. So of course, there's students, there's existing communities, there's families, there's small families, etc. But I absolutely, for the council, for the city council, that whole sort of accommodating all housing needs right across the board is absolutely critical.
Siobhan, in terms of how that social housing stock that you talk about is managed in the future, how should it be managed?
Well, effectively there at the moment, we've 1 in every 8 houses a social house. So on managing it in the future, there's always housing providers there who currently carry out housing management. And it would be remiss of me to say in that in the future, the housing executive want to borrow and we want to build and invest. So we would want to be in that mix too. In that, it all comes down to the tenants and the residents. They need to be core, they need to be part of it, and we have to provide them what they need. So effectively, what's good housing management? Good housing management is knowing your tenants, knowing their requirements, knowing their needs, making sure that sense of community is being created. There is a commercial part, and of course there is, and it is about getting the income in, and that is critically important on delivery, but there is a social and citizen responsibility. And I think more than ever during COVID, we've seen that it's critically important there that we're putting something back in society as well. So in that, there are areas that can be expanded, like apprenticeships, employment, linking in with social enterprises. So having other extracurriculars for people so that they really truly are living in a dynamic society. Everybody wants to live in a house and have all this around them. So it should be a right for everybody, irrespective of their income background, to have that. So that's what I would see as really good management of it in the future.
Yeah, really interesting in the way it should be looked after. Thank you for that, Siobhan. James, I want to come to you next. Now, James never turns up here empty-handed and has come well prepared with a video, which we're just going to show you just now. It gives you a good example of Titanic Quarter, what it is, and we'll find out a little bit more about it in just a second. James, a brilliant video there. You got the sun to shine, which I know it always does on Titanic Quarter. We know what Titanic Quarter is, but for anybody that hasn't been to Belfast, explain a little bit more about it. We've seen some great shots there.
No problem, and thank you very much, David. I guess Titanic Quarter is a large regeneration project. It's over 160 acres of former shipyard. It has been the development process started nearly 20 years ago with a lot of master planning and a very key focus about delivering very high quality, sustainable development and a great place. And it's the place for those people, a place for people, and it's centered around that, whether they're looking to live there, work there, or just to recreate there and to visit. And we've trying to be a catalyst and to kind of lead in terms of what we've done. So when you look at projects like the Gateway offices, first LEED gold building from a sustainability perspective outside of the southeast of England more than 10 years ago, helping deliver projects like Titanic Belfast, with a huge rise in the visitors into the city, and leading across city centre residential as well.
And it's such a mix that you have there. What's it been like growing Titanic Quarter over those years? And I suppose you had the luxury of a brownfield site, so you can nearly plan it out as you need to.
Yeah, well, I suppose probably to step back a little bit first in terms of how it started. I've had the privilege of working on Titanic Quarter now for over 15 years.
Wow!
And when I joined the company, there was less than 1,000 people worked on the site. There was a security barrier at the front entrance to the site. And if you look at it over a very short period of time beyond that, there's been a huge amount of master planning carried out and really driving how we're going to change the place. So what does that look like? It's been a very interesting process. Where are we today? On a daily basis, we have about 20,000 people that live, work, visit and stay in Queen's Island. There's over 8,000 people work there. We have a residential community of over 1,000 people. We've pioneered various sectors, adding with the likes of Titanic Studios, which, as many of us know, has been home of Game of Thrones for over a decade, and has really helped build that industry, which has expanded in Northern Ireland and is a key economic driver. So it has been a very interesting journey to date, and we've a lot of ambition now on what's next.
How much is that demand led? That the building and the planning that you do, how much of it is demand led, and how much of it is build it and they will come?
I guess it's a mixture, and you're continually looking at where the next market trends are.
Yeah.
I mean, in our master planning 15 years ago, no notion of a media campus. Today we have a huge media campus and that type of industry. Some products you will build purpose built, like the Amazon distribution centre that we built last year and delivered during the pandemic, right through to a joint venture project that we currently have on site in partnership with Belfast Harbour, which is over a £30 million investment in Grade A, BREEAM Excellent, speculative office building, which we'll top out on later this month, and will be finished early part of next year. So some of them you build and they will come. Some of them you build to specific client requirements, and it's about for me, when you start to look at the various components that make good mixed use regeneration, residential is a huge part of it. The economic piece is a huge part of it. But actually doing all of those together, that's what actually creates the place, the animation, that 24 environment. That in itself then starts to breed safety and all of the other bits and pieces. And that's where residential is a key component of this, because it's not a place; it's a place that is animated 24/7.
Give us a flavour of residential in TQ at the moment and your plans for the future to build that out further.
So to date, we have built about 474 apartments called the Arc, which has been hugely successful. It's fully occupied, but very interestingly, yes, there are in terms of how it is occupied, we have a considerable number of owner occupiers. And even in that journey, some of that has been very interesting. People have moved there temporarily and have ended up buying their apartment over time. And those are people, when you start to interact with them, it was only when they started to live in the city centre that they realised how great it was. Right through to people who have moved to the city, who work in the city, and how moving to here, locating to the city centre, has actually changed their life, where they're not commuting, they're having breakfast with their family, walking to work, coming home for lunch, walking back. That's what people and our next generations want. That's how they want to live.
Yeah.
And so for us, we are going to be a big contributor to Belfast Vision. We have set ourselves a goal of building over 2,500 homes over the next 14 years. But that is across, and when you start to think about residential, these are homes for all, and it's about doing it across all of the different subsectors of residential, whether it's build to rent, whether it's build to sell, social, affordable, and creating a real community. And as we do this, one of the beauties about Titanic Quarter is we work at a macro management level as well. We have the benefit of Belfast Harbour Police, and we actually manage and control all of the public realm areas, and they're really key because it's all about lifestyle. It's creating the new squares, the new public realm, and that's a part of our master planning and the placemaking that we do.
Yeah, and it's having just each piece of it. And you would agree with what we were talking about earlier in terms of the mixed use tenure is.
It's really important. I mean, this is about building community. This is about building communities and building great places, and giving people what they want in the future. We quite often think about it now or the past, but when you look at the city, you look over the last 5 years, nearly 5,000 purpose-built student accommodation beds. That's our workforce in 3, 4, 5 years' time.
Yeah.
They're used to living in the city centre. They're used to high quality accommodation, and this is where this will help fuel the city centre development of high quality residential.
Yeah. And we've talked, Rory's mentioned there about how housing has been, a key part of regeneration of cities across the UK. Do you see that the same for Belfast?
Most definitely so. And Belfast has got all the ingredients. Number one, it's a great city, but when you look at the economic development that's going on, its ability to attract high value inward investment. So as those companies grow, and you've got to look at companies like Citigroup, who came here with a very small aspiration of a couple of hundred jobs, have grown to probably in excess of 3,000 people because Belfast works. But if they grow, the people that they employ want to live there. And as you look at how people want to live in the future, it's all about lifestyle. It's about being able to recreate, walk. People don't want car. It's not about owning cars anymore. It's about getting into the 15-minute city where you have everything at your fingertips. You go out to eat on a Tuesday night. You don't lose 3 hours of your life in the car traveling every day. It's about having it all at your fingertips.
Yeah. So I suppose residential really is key to that broader economic growth for the future.
To me, it's a major component, and you watch how cities like Liverpool, Manchester have grown. It's everything growing in parallel, and that's where when you look at Belfast, the economic growth is there. You see fabulous employers growing in the city. The residential is going to come and going to start to match that, and that's what actually creates the whole picture.
And you mentioned Citi there, one of the world's biggest banks, and I heard a figure the other day. They're trading 10% of the world's foreign exchange every day, and that's in a building on your site. And I suppose the draw of being able to have a really good city centre living quite close to them is a draw for them to build out their business further in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's a draw for Citigroup, but also your PwCs, your Deloittes, and all of these, and all of the other major institutions. So for all of these major employers in the city, actually having the residential, the places for people to live, right through to your media campuses and business places, and even from our own experiences, you're talking to the very senior people from Paramount who've just completed a major production in Titanic Studios. They couldn't get over. This is the first time that they've lived 5 minutes walk to the studios and to the office. Yeah. That's what Belfast is all about. 10 minutes from the airport, you're in the city centre.
Yeah.
It's compactness, walking to your restaurants, having everything. That's that is what that is what Belfast has. And I think we're just at that moment now where we have all the ingredients to really start to grow.
Yeah, Rory, if I could bring you in there, I suppose that tight knit, that 15-minute city that people talk about, is that a draw for inward investors? Because we've heard how cities grown its business here, and it, if they can be assured that their population can live and in the city and work as well, it really can help.
Yes, absolutely. So, it's a wider trend, the growth in city centre living, and for example, in the build-to-rent sector, we've seen that taking off in some of the key UK cities where that market of the mixed-use city centre living has been an anchor to that investment.
Yeah, and it's, I suppose, about just building that real life in the city. Cathy, I suppose from the council's point of view, that's really quite key about building a life for people that come to work in companies in FDI and in Indigenous companies as well that want to live around the city centre, walk to work, walk to the pub, walk to the restaurant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose even, as James had talked about there, about that kind of 24/7 and the curation and the animation, if you have people in your city centre, that placemaking, that kind of, the public realm, the services, that community infrastructure is all, part and parcel of it. So it's not just, I suppose, housing on its own, but just how that all kind of works together. And even in terms of, so it's not just about the physical and the built environment, but, for example, we have, as part of the city reimagining and the sort of cultural strategy, the council is heavily involved in relation to, looking to see how culture, arts, the tourism, all of that animation piece all plays part of it. So that's kind of the vision, and that's where we want to really get to. So it's it's not just about the physical environment, but it's about all the bits that sit in between, and all about the kind of the activity and the animation of it as well.
Yeah, and making a real place to live, really. Yeah. And I suppose even from the social sector, that's really important as well. It's a really important aspect.
Absolutely. It totally is, and with that they want things like, they want to have the trees planted, they want sustainable areas, they want to have green areas, they want to have shops. I mean, it's very basic, actually, requirements there, but what it will do is it will really bring that city centre completely back to life, I think, again, and it will do it by having people living there night and day.
Yeah.
And with all of that comes huge economic return for a city centre as well. So we're hugely supportive of it.
Yeah. Cathy, you touched on the Belfast Region City deal earlier on. Mm-hmm. I mean, that provides opportunities really to supercharge parts of the economy and in Belfast and the wider Northern Ireland as well. How's that helping in terms of city centre regeneration and city centre living?
Yeah, look, I think it's massive, in terms of, it's a £1 billion deal. It is across the Belfast City Retail deal. So it's about a real focus on digital and innovation, and in terms of, even in relation to kind of the jobs, the skills as well, and tourism and regeneration. I talked about one of the big projects is that £100 million destination hub, a new tourist attraction right in the city centre. So, I mean, that's about driving footfall. That's about driving, tourism and activity in the city centre. The regional, the rapid transit as well. But and I think I touched on earlier about the innovation city Belfast, and about having an innovation district and working with other partners, in the harbour, Belfast Harbour, TQ and elsewhere, and the universities, about really driving that innovation and digital as being one of the key growth sectors for Belfast.
Yeah.
And then how that translates into the demand for city centre living. Absolutely see that as one of the key levers.
Yeah, so many parts of it, and obviously that fits into what you're doing in Titanic Quarter as well in terms of digital and.
Oh, indeed, yeah. No, certainly, Titanic is part of the innovation district. Yeah. It runs from Catalyst at the top of Queen's Island, Titanic Quarter, through into the city centre.
Yeah.
So that in itself will help stimulate the employment side. And there are Belfast has some really smart things happening in it. And some of our new tenants that are growing in Titanic Quarter on the commercial side. the innovation side. It's just fabulous, and that's all driven out of the universities. So the whole ecosystem works. The city regions deal. That's just going to stimulate it, drive it, and that'll drive a growing population as well. Because people will want to come, people will want to cluster, and this is where the residential piece. It's just people, the next generation, they're going to want to live in it. They're going to want to walk to it, cycle to it, and the whole leisure side will go at the same time, because the lifestyle today, it's experience based.
Yeah, exactly. There's no panel discussion that can happen in this era in the last few months that can't touch on sustainability in some way or the other. How important is that? Because we're talking about building, we're talking about new builds, we're talking about regenerating old buildings. How important is that, Cathy, if I can?
Yeah, I suppose just across the board in terms of what, sustainability, obviously in relation to construction and the standards around that, but also we've been working with the Housing Executive, and as part of that, the Reset for Growth, the Innovation and Inclusive Growth Commission, about a real drive to do to retrofit as well. So just about having that up front and central in terms of energy. But if we're going to realise the ambitions of the growth ambitions in terms of all of those additional homes, that clearly has an impact in terms of travel and sustainability. So if we're doing that, then it's about what are the sustainable choices we have to make. So as part of that kind of bolder vision for Belfast, and about how making the kind of with city centre living as key focus to that, but what are the implications then in terms of how the transit and travel, and kind of ending or decreasing that car dominance as well. And James touched upon the fact that if you're living in the city centre and working potentially then in the city centre as well, there's not the same need for all of the commuting and just about that the better kind of public space, the public realm, and the sustainability from that perspective, which all follows through even in relation to emissions and air quality, etc. So it's really critical, and the resilience for us as well as part of kind of the resilience strategy sitting within the council, that's key to it. So I suppose in terms of how that plays out, I would suspect as well that, and kind of what we find is that there's quite a strong demand, and James, we can talk to that more in relation to kind of that end product, that actually tenants are really keen in relation to kind of sustainable choices. Yeah,
I think that's for the next generation. The next generation is about is all about sustainable living, and it's about the buildings, but it's about lifestyle. The car is becoming a very expensive commodity, but people are all about health and well-being. And that's where the change is. People want their personal time. They don't want to be sitting in cars. And creating places where they can live, where they can walk, they can cycle. Putting all of that infrastructure in creates a very sustainable environment. That's the future. That is the future. If you want a car, you're in a car club. You hire a car for the weekend when you need it. When you want to go somewhere, you use public transport. You walk and cycle. That is the future. That is the future where we're going. It's coming quicker than we think it is. And when you talk to the young generation who are coming up through school and up through college, they want to be sustainable. They're very aware of it.
And I suppose, Rory, from a wider perspective, other cities that maybe their public transport system is more advanced, and we're beginning to see that with the Belfast Transport Hub, which is coming down the line. And I suppose that will just help us in the future offer a more sustainable transport system and build on that for a more sustainable residential living in the city centre.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, tying in with some of the other points that people have just been saying, it needs to be you need to have sort of sticks and carrots to get it to work properly. So, look at London as an extreme example. It's almost impossible to park in the centre of London. And that's part of the reason why people use public transport. And so you need to sort of think of a similar strategy for Belfast. And quite a lot of the development sites that are in Belfast are used to surface level car parking at the moment.
Good.
So over time, you'll be moving away from that towards a strategy where there's less. I'd encourage Belfast to move to a strategy where there's less parking available in the city centre. Also linked to that it's that the incentives for travelling to work by car are reduced. So a very interesting example is Nottingham, which has introduced a workplace charge on car parking. So most employers at the moment actually quite heavily subsidise driving to work because they provide free car parking spaces, but they don't provide free public transport.
Yeah.
So that's a massive hidden subsidy on incentivising people to drive to work. And so, it's being explicit about things like that and addressing them, and also linking to the whole sustainability agenda. Of course, there's still going to be people that need to drive and use vehicles, and what we need to do is move that towards a sustainable agenda where electrical vehicles are increasingly encouraged, and that, particularly in a city centre context, needs to have significant investment in electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Because there isn't the same off-street, on your drive or that you'd have in suburban areas for people to charge their cars. So there needs to be a more concentrated and focused strategy on electric vehicle charging.
Yeah, very much so. And in terms of, you mentioned there, and you've mentioned a couple of times, the availability of land to build here or to regenerate older buildings. Is that something that from an investment point of view is attractive? Compared to other cities that we have a good land bank that's there and ready to go?
Yeah, no, I mean, as I said earlier, Belfast is very much at the start of the trajectory compared to a number of other UK cities. And so I think there's huge potential there. And it's often at the start that you can realise that, the most gains and the breaking into the market and growing the market. So I think it's very much, as I said earlier, there's a few things that need to be done to help unlock and get that market going. But once you've done that, then there's plenty of potential and there's plenty of land to bring forward.
Sure. I want to. Our time's marching on, and I want to just go around each, if I could, to wrap up shortly. And Rory, seeing as we're with you at the moment, how would you like to see residential city centre living in Belfast evolve over the next 10 years, and how would you like the city to look in 10 years' time when it comes to residential living in the city centre?
So I think, it's tying in with a number of themes that the rest of the panel have been mentioning. So I think it definitely needs to be mixed tenure and appealing to a range of different markets. So the older people that's been mentioned, social housing, affordable housing. Good practice is for that to be integrated into new developments so that communities are linked together and have common experiences, objectives, and approaches to solving and take, sort of having a attractive working living environment. And it's about knitting the city together. So I think there's, as I said, the flip side of actually being a lot of land, that some parts of the city centre are a bit disjointed, and that's because you've got these open spaces. And developable sites, and so bringing those forward will actually help then create increasing the cohesion and connectedness of the city centre.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. Siobhan, how would you like to see the city centre in terms of
I'd like it to be
living?
very ambitious. I'd like first and foremost that it's affordable, so that everybody has access to a property and can live if they choose within the city. I would like to see from the sustainability side a number of our pilots actually rolled out that have been tested. So we've tested on the electric cars. It is the way of the future, so there will need to be electric points and the infrastructure. I'd like to see where the tree planting is taking place, that we've more of that and going on within the city centre. I'd like to see where we've an significant increase now in electricity costs, that I would like to see some of our pilots, which is the air, hydrogen and electricity-led solutions, linking back to what Kathy says, is not emitting the toxins up in the air, and that people are aware of how to use their house properly and ventilate, etc. And again, I'd like some of the nice innovations coming forward in properties that are going to mean that when some of us aren't here, future generations are going to be still living in those properties, and they've left a long-term positive legacy.
And we've come on such a journey so far, and got so far in the last 10 years. I'd say you'd be pretty confident that we'll meet those
I'm
aims.
confident we will. And we've another one as well. We talk about those conversions of buildings. We've done with the National Lottery, or the Heritage Lottery, we completed a conversion of heritage buildings into housing. And it's working exceptionally well, and people are living there in long-term leases. So I think that the skills, the capabilities and the knowledge is sitting with all partners on how to do this.
Yeah.
And the strategies are now in place. I think the key thing here is let's drive it out. And we've around 10 city centre, just, developments and housing led underway. Waterside, Sirocco Works, Tribeca, Posnett Street, Hope Street, Weavers Court. So the building blocks are all there. So I think now really what I'm excited about is we get on with it.
Good. A nice way to end that point. James, apart from us all moving to live and work in Titanic Quarter, how would you like to see the city in 10 years?
10 years is a really short period of time in development. So how do I see it? The place is going to be buzzing.
Yeah.
It has just started to transform, with the student movement into the city centre, the residential that's going to come with it. It's a super city, lots of things to do, great restaurants, great places. It's just going to get better, and it's going to be buzzing.
Lovely. And Kathy, last word to you.
Yes, I love that kind of thought of buzzing and vibrancy and kind of that animation, and also just there's less grey space, and that that kind of the spaces in between. So not just about the housing, but just about the space in between and how that connects and connects to the existing communities as well. So
well, thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Rory. Thank you, Siobhan. Thank you, James, for your participation today. It's been brilliant and great to hear. So our time's pretty much up with that. If you didn't manage to get your questions across, then please do get in touch. Today's session has shown us, and I think you'll agree, the huge potential which Belfast has for city centre living. And it's also allowed us to drill down on what we as a city need to do to reach our bold ambitions that we've set out so eloquently here by our panel. For those of you who weren't familiar with the city before this session, I hope that's given you a bit of a flavour of what Belfast has to offer. Than for those of you closer to the river Lagan. Hopefully it's emboldened your thinking around city centre living. That's it from us. I'd like to thank our panel again for taking part. I'd like to thank you as well for tuning in. And I'd now like to hand back to Callum. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thanks to our panel as well for a really interesting and positive discussion this afternoon. And also special thanks to Belfast Renewed Ambition for bringing Belfast to Real Estate Live UK. There is still more to come from Real Estate Live UK today, with one more session which is about to get underway, supported by Sound Diplomacy and Vicarage Field, as we ask, what role does music have in regeneration and supporting vibrant communities? You can book onto that session and those that are taking place tomorrow, our final day of Real Estate Live UK in October 2021, by visiting the programme page on our website, which is www.realestatelive.co.uk. But just before we wrap up this session, we have a presentation from our wellbeing partner, Firma Group, to encourage you to take a short break, ensuring you remain focused for the rest of the day. Supporting people's well-being is at the heart of everything Firma Group do, and they believe well-being goes beyond individual pursuits and is linked to each other and the natural world. Thank you all once again for joining us this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Hi, I'm Cosmin, Wellness Manager at Terme Bucharest, one of Europe's largest well-being facilities. Supporting people's well-being is at the heart of everything we do at Terme Group, and that's why we're very proud to be the well-being partner of Real Estate Live 2021. we wanted to give you a small reminder about the importance of taking regular breaks from your screen for your mental and physical health. Researchers found that if you take breaks after 1 hour and a half or 1 hour for 10-15 minutes, it helps improve your mood, your concentration, your focus, and also protects your muscle and your joints. So don't forget to take a break from your desk after this session. Stretching, going outside, or making a cup of tea will gonna help you improve your physical well-being. I hope you enjoyed the incredible session at Real Estate Live 2021, and that one day we're gonna have the chance to meet in person here in Terme Bucharest. Take care and enjoy.